Morning, I'm KC. This is Keystone Curiosity, where we talk about all things unique to the state of Pennsylvania. I'm here with my friend Rodney Culp, and we're going to be talking about Gruber Wagon Works and the Wheelwrights of Pennsylvania. Located in the city of Reading, just off of Route 183, the Gruber Wagon Works serves as a window to the past in a world before cars. Since the invention of the wheel, transportation over land was done almost solely through wagons and carts. This would last the majority of human history and would only start to change in the late 1800s after the Industrial Revolution. This is the world that our story begins in, with a man by the name of Franklin H. Gruber. Born in 1835, Franklin Gruber would apprentice with his brother and his cousin, learning the trade of a wheelwright. He would marry, have children, and open his own business in Lower Heidelberg Township by 1870. This would start small, mostly making repairs to farm equipment, but would eventually grow to include the construction of entire wagons. As the business grew, he would look to establish a place to expand with the demand. Gruber would purchase a property in Pleasant Valley, moving his family to a former hotel, and begin construction of a new building across the road in 1882. This building would house everything needed to design, construct, and repair wagons of all sorts. It would have its own wood shop, blacksmith, and paint shop, and utilize the most modern equipment of the time, with belt-driven machinery powered by the nearby creek. Construction would finish in 1884, and by the spring of '85, fully constructed wagons would begin rolling out of the shop. The first few employees were four of Franklin's sons, John, Adam, Jacob, and George, who would continue the business, operating it upon their father's passing in July of 1898. Of the 10 children the brothers had, only one took an interest in the business, Frank P. Gruber. Born in 1884, Frank was essentially raised at the wagon works, which would see him spending time with each of his uncles, as well as his father, John, learning each part of the trade. Frank would see the wagon works through the remaining years of its operation, as the rise of popularity in the automobiles saw to the decline of the need for his practice. The last fully constructed wagon would roll out of the shop in 1956, and Frank would continue the business primarily as a repair shop thereafter. It was about this time in the mid-50s that a series of severe floods had plagued the Delaware River basin. This prompted the U.S. government to have the Army Corps of Engineers conduct a study to determine the water-related needs of the area to see what could be done. The result of this study saw Congress passing the Flood Control Act, which authorized the engineers to plan the construction of Blue Marsh Dam, one of 5 dams that will be built in southeast Pennsylvania for the purpose of flood control. From 1970 to 1972, over 5,700 acres of lands would be selected and purchased under eminent domain throughout the Pleasant Valley. This included the property of Gruber Wagon Works. When the Army Corps of Engineers arrived to appraise the property, they marveled at what they had found. Everything was still there. Tools, materials, machinery, everything needed for a fully functioning wagon shop was left just as though the workers had merely stepped out to lunch. This was largely in part because Frank Gruber was still working on the premises as the sole employee conducting repairs and odd jobs as they arose. The astonishment at the historical value of the wagon works and all of its equipment led to requests for evaluations from both the National Park Service and the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. These evaluations confirmed that the building was in fact a historic relic, and would see the Gruber Wagon Works added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1972. Though efforts on preservation had been successful thus far, the building still lay in the area that would soon be covered in the waters of Blue Marsh Lake. After deliberation, it was decided that the relics within would lose some of their value if removed from the building. For this reason, the Army Corps of Engineers and the County of Berks would begin putting forth efforts to relocate the entire building. But these things cost money, and being a branch of the military, the engineers would need to petition the government for the appropriate funds for the project. And if you know anything about the amount of bureaucracy involved in this, it really should be no surprise whatsoever that it took about 2 years until the right legislation allowed for the purchase of the property in 1974, and yet another 2 years until a different legislation had set aside $922,000 for the relocation in October of 1976. The relocation was nothing short of an engineering masterpiece. The building had to be cut into 4 separate pieces, placed on flatbed trailers, and hauled miles away to its current location, which was nothing more than farmland at the time. The margin for error was extremely small, with the pieces of the structure needing to fit within half an inch of their original resting place. The entire process took more than 6 weeks, including having to wait for the field to freeze so the weighed-down trucks wouldn't sink into the mud. But with winches and hydraulic jacks easing their loads into place on December 23rd, the final piece of Gruber Wagon Works, a tribute to the wheelwrights of the past, was successfully moved to its new home.
But what exactly is a wheelwright? To find out, I figured it's probably best to talk to somebody who actually knows.
So a wheelwright is someone who builds and repairs horse-drawn equipment, wagons, carriages, top buggies, sleighs, wheelbarrows, push carts, anything that's pulled by a goat, a horse, oxen, and anyone who can make wooden wagon wheels.
Rodney Culp Sr. from Boyertown has been doing the job of a wheelwright since the early 90s.
Good morning, my name is Rodney Culp. I got into doing the wheelwright work because this is what my family did for the last 7 generations.
When I told him I was doing a video on Gruber Wagon Works, he offered to show me his process. First, a piece of wood is turned using a lathe to act as a hub. The center of the hub is then mortised out to receive the spokes. These spokes are drawn out using a template and cut on a bandsaw. Once they have their rough shape, they are sanded down until they are smooth. It takes anywhere from about 12 to 16 spokes depending on the size of the wheel. One end is then rounded over using a bit and brace, or power drill nowadays. This forms a dowel that when drilled out will fit into the outside of the wheel, called a felloe. These felloes are often bent into their shape using a process called steam bend. In this process, a piece of wood is steamed for hours, soaking in the moisture and allowing it to be more malleable to fit into a form. The spokes are then individually fit into the mortise of the hub and leveraged into position into the felloes, forming a complete wheel. To finish out the project, a metal rim is then heated, causing it to expand. It is then tapped into place, forming an iron tire around the outside of the wheel. The tolerance for error is extremely small, with the metal needing to be within 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch of the circumference of the wheel.
Point in case, we were actually completely unsuccessful at this last part because the metal was just too small.
For him, it's not just a profession, it's a tribute to the culture of his forefathers.
I need to be able to do what my ancestors did here for 200 years. It's the ability and challenge to do so and succeed at this situation. I've done general construction work, cabinet work, I've built furniture, and this is still tenfold harder than all that.
And being a woodworker myself, he is absolutely right. There's really nothing I've ever done in my entire career that has compared with the difficulty of trying to build this one wheel. This trade is honestly unlike anything I've ever messed with.
This is exactly the trade that you will find preserved and displayed at Gruber Wagon Works. Having such an interest in history as I do, this is one of those locations that has absolutely fascinated me. With how extensive and complete the collection is, the details of the educational value here is unparalleled. After the relocation of the building, the Wagon Works would open to the public in 1980 as a part of the newly developed Berks County Heritage Center. Open to walk-ins during the warmer months, the Heritage Center offers tours of Gruber Wagon Works to tell the story of the building and to enlighten those interested on the tricks of the trade. They also specialize in field trip programs for local schools. These explore all of the facilities on the grounds, even going so far as to conduct an environmental program where students investigate the ecosystem of the Tolpahoppin Creek.
Resting about 45 minutes from either Allentown or Lancaster, and with the plethora of programs available, there's something to be found of interest here for people and classes of all sorts. And especially with field trip opportunities available directly on the Berks County Heritage Center's website, which I'll include links to below, it's never been quite this easy to catch a rare glimpse of a bygone era frozen in time. That's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. As per the usual, if you have any suggestions of where you'd like to see me go next, feel free to leave them in the comments below. In the meantime, hit that like and subscribe so that you can receive notifications about anything else near Gruber Wagon Works or all across the state of Pennsylvania itself. But in the meantime, y'all have a good one.